The Grandparents as Parents program is a program of the CAC Office on Aging. For 20 years, Grandparents as Parents, affectionately known as GAP, have served relative caregivers in Knox County. Sometimes these special families are referred to as kinship families or grandfamilies. I'm Tracy Vandevate. I'm the program manager for GAP. I appreciate you allowing me to share information about grandfamilies and about the GAP program. Many grandfamilies tell us that they are alone and people do not understand their struggles. A large part of the Office on Aging mission is to reduce isolation and loneliness and to keep people connected to their community. GAP offers information, support group meetings, outreach to the community. We assist people with resources, and sometimes we even can do referrals for families. We have a wide range of information on topics. We also have a guidebook that I'll talk more about later. Currently, clients most often request information on food, legal, and housing resources. Many times, all we do is serve as a listening ear for families, and they share their struggles and their joyful moments with us, and there are many joyful moments for grandfamilies. Through the GAP program, we are able to serve relative caregivers across the state. We primarily focus on Knox County and the surrounding counties. There are no age or income requirements, and enrollment is free. Ann Stokes is our case manager for GAP. Ann is very limited in serving Knox County families through case management. We can also offer everyone a monthly newsletter, a weekly electronic bulletin, and currently through COVID-19, we are hosting a weekly conference call for families. GAP has a Grandparents as Parents guidebook. This guidebook shares information about legal issues, health care, child development, teen challenges, and more. There is also a resource guide for Knox, Anderson, Blount, Sevier, and Loudoun counties in the guidebook. Kinship care is not new. There are 2.7 million grandparents across the country raising grandchildren. Almost 40% are over the age of 60, which means that they are in the age area where they may be retired or thinking about retirement. They are maybe living on a fixed income. They are looking at school differently because schools, the last time that they had a direct connection to school maybe have been 20, 30, or even 40 years ago. Then the other 60% may still be in the workforce. They're under 60, and they may be deciding whether they should retire early or possibly that they're going to work past retirement age, depending on what their situation is with their grandchildren. In Tennessee, almost 77,000 grandparents are raising grandchildren. We know this does not include aunts, uncles, and siblings. This is just grandparents. Even though when I say grandfamilies, I mean all families, all relative care families when we talk about grandfamilies. In Knox County, there are over 4,500 grandparents raising grandchildren. And just like the national average, 41% of those in Knox County are over the age of 60. So that equates to serving about 2,300 grandchildren. But there's still other children we know that are in different relative caregivers' homes other than just the grandparent home. These numbers come from the U.S. Census data, and the U.S. Census data collects the information about grand families, but not other relative caregiver families. Through GAP, we serve currently we have about 180 families that we're serving through GAP. Primarily, most of them are grandparents, but not all of them are. We serve families that are aunts and uncles. We have siblings that take care of younger children, and we also have occasionally friends of the family. So we have as young as 21 in our group, and we have as old as 92 that are relative caregivers. So why so many grand families? There are, it used to be, history has shown that war and disease were the primary causes of grand families across the world, but currently substance abuse is the #1 reason why grand families are in their particular caregiving situations. About 50% or a little over 50% indicate nationally that substance abuse is the primary reason that they are the caregivers. We also here in Knoxville, we are seeing the same thing, that people indicate to us that substance abuse is the primary reason that they are caregivers. Incarceration and death of a parent kind of comes secondary to the substance abuse. Sometimes we see a health crisis. We have several families that the parent has cancer or some other life-threatening disease, and the grandparent has to take over the care of the child. We do see abuse and neglect and abandonment. We don't see a whole lot on deployment, and we occasionally see the lacking of parenting skills. We do not see deportation very often. So by parenting again, grand families provide safe homes and homes that the children know. Children overall tend to have better outcomes in school, mental health, behavioral health, and they report that they feel more loved, and they also have a greater preservation of cultural identity and community connection when they're living with a relative versus a non-relative foster care placement. But this doesn't come without challenges to the grand families. So health for grand families, especially for older people, it can be very taxing taking on younger children or teens, as everyone knows. Adding people into the home can cause an economic stress, always, because if they're on a fixed income, they were not planning on having their grandchildren back in their home. So this opens up a lot of economic distress for families. Sometimes they may have downsized, and now they have the children. They were in a 1-bedroom, and now they've got to find something else and upsize again. There's all sorts of legal issues that almost every family will have to navigate through. That includes custody issues, visitation issues, adoption if they decide that that is the route they want to take, but also their wills, because now they have children in their homes and they're caregiving for children. So wills is a big issue that they have to estate plan and see what if something happens to them, what's going to happen to the grandchildren. They are many times the last family member that can have the children. And so sometimes a plan B or a plan C even, we try to help them figure out what that might be if something happens to them. Of course, their energy levels are different. However, a lot of grand families tell us that by getting these kids, they have, they feel more energized, more directed. They have something positive to look forward to, and they set some goals because they know that kids have to get up and go to school and get dressed, and they have to find activities, and so sometimes that alleviates maybe the loneliness and sort of solitude that they were feeling before. However, they all tell us, you know, it's very hard raising children, and by the end of the day, they're always feeling tired. Some face major life changes. They may have to move homes. They may not be able to go to Sunday school class anymore or be with their friends like they used to anymore. They may, and a lot of times they've lost the grandparenting role. So when the children used to come over, maybe they let them eat ice cream for lunch. However, that's not possible to eat ice cream for lunch anymore. So they've gone from a grandparenting role to a parenting role, and that is always challenging to get the kids to see and to understand why sometimes there are more rules than they had when they came to grandma's house before. There's also there could be a loss of lifestyle. Some people have retired and they thought they would be traveling and visiting other family members and doing a whole lot of different things that now that they're going to have to put that on hold. Isolation, while they may have their grandchildren and they feel excited about that, and so some of that has eliminated certain parts of isolation. Sometimes you see their friends dropping off because they are not participating in the things that they were doing before with their social groups that they were with before, and those social groups are off doing something else, and so now they feel isolated and alone. And then ageism is sort of a big thing, but a hidden thing, and we see that ageism comes into, especially within the school system, because they don't look like the typical parents in the school, even though that they are doing the parenting. So you may have a 75-year-old grandparent who is caring for a first grader, and they don't look like the typical first grade 20 or 30-year-old mom in the classroom, even though that they're wanting to be a part of that group. So they sometimes tend to feel like they're left out because of their age, or they're overlooked because of their age. So how can schools and teachers and administrators and guidance counselors and all those important people in the schools help build a better relationship with grandfamilies? So remember that language is important, that sometimes these are the grandparents, and younger children tend to call their grandparents by whatever their grandparent, grandma, grandpa, their name is, but sometimes just saying grown up or guardian might be a better way to express that. We see that older children, that teens, by the time they get to be teenagers, that a lot of times they're calling their grandparents mom and dad, so that there's no difference in the household or in their school setting or with their friends. That grandparents are just the mom and dad, whether they have been adopted or not adopted, they just use that language. So ask questions about their home situation, and talk with grandfamilies. Most grandfamilies want to be very involved in their grandchildren's education. Remember again that it's been a long time ago for many of them when they had kids in the schools, and schools have changed greatly. Safety has changed in the schools, the security that you have to go through to get into the schools. School schedules are very different than they looked 30 years ago. Curriculum is very different than they looked 30 years ago. Technology is also a struggle for many of our grandfamilies. It seems to be a struggle for many of us just in general, since we're using more of it, but it's still a struggle for grandfamilies. Grandfamilies may have little to no knowledge about texting or emails, which I know is a popular form of communication with teachers today. Giving them a call is probably one of the best things that you can do in talking with grandfamilies over the phone. Building a relationship with a family over the phone, I know is time consuming, but it can have long-lasting impact for grandfamilies. Remember, grandfamilies may be embarrassed by their age or their lack of understanding about classwork or teacher instructions. Many don't come to evening events because they have no transportation or they do not drive at night. They may have difficulty hearing and be embarrassed about asking you to repeat the instructions because they don't want to seem foolish or not knowledgeable about what you're talking about, but really it was just because they really didn't hear. And we also want you to be able to share about the GAP program with your families. We want to work together with you to bring services and information and help you build those connections with grandfamilies. So if you would like to make a referral to grandparents' parents, you can call us or you can send us an email, reach out to us any way that you wish. We also have guidebooks. The Grandparents Guidebook is available online, but if you would like copies, we will be happy to get you copies. We also have a professional list in which we will send you our newsletter electronically and flyers if you would like to be part of our professional distribution list. We're available for that. So I appreciate your time today, and I hope this was helpful.